She collapsed in the courtroom on the day her divorce was finalized, shattered, pregnant, and utterly alone. A billionaire stranger who was there for unrelated business saw her fall and without hesitation swept her into his arms. He carried her out past the stunned crowd, his jaw set, his heart pounding. When the paramedics asked who he was, he looked down at her unconscious face and said firmly, "She's my wife." Her ex-husband laughed from the doorway. "Good luck with that disaster." "Hi, my beautiful, unstoppable family, my greatest strength, and my daily inspiration. Welcome back to another soul-shaking story. May the Lord wrap you in peace that never fades, fill your homes with laughter that echoes, and guard every pregnant mother and every broken heart reading this right now. May no woman ever feel worthless. May no man forget the value of the queen beside him, and may every child be born into arms that will fight for them. If this story already has your heart racing, drop a like, type, "I'm with you," and let's dive in together. Carolyn Frey had always believed that marriage meant forever, until the day Kevin stopped coming home at night. For months, she had made excuses, late meetings, work stress, traffic, but the night she found the hotel receipt in his coat pocket, crumpled and stained with perfume she didn't recognize, the lies stopped working. Her hands shook as she smoothed it flat on the kitchen table under the dim overhead light. Presidential suite, 2-night stay. The dates matched a weekend he'd told her he was visiting his brother. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "He's with me tonight. Thought you should know." Attached was a photo. Kevin, another woman. His arm around her waist in a way that spoke of ownership, intimacy, permanence. Carolyn's knees buckled. She gripped the counter, her pregnant belly pressing against the cold granite as nausea rolled through her. She scrolled through his phone later that night while he slept beside her, oblivious or simply uncaring. Weeks of messages, promises, plans to leave her once the situation was handled. She was the situation. Her. The woman who had loved him since college. The woman carrying his child. When Kevin walked into the kitchen the next morning, coffee in hand, he found her sitting at the table with the phone between them. His face didn't change. No shock. No guilt. Just a flicker of annoyance. "How long?" Carolyn's voice came out hoarse, raw from hours of crying. Kevin set his mug down slowly, leaning against the counter as if they were discussing weekend plans. "Does it really matter? Does it matter?" She stood, trembling. "We've been married for 6 years. I'm pregnant with your child. Yes, Kevin, it matters." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Look, I didn't plan for this to happen, but it did, and I'm not going to apologize for finally being happy." The words landed like stones in her chest. "Happy? You're happy ruining our family?" "There is no family, Carolyn." His tone was ice. "Not anymore. I want a divorce." "No." She crossed to him, desperation clawing at her throat. "We can fix this. Therapy. Counseling. Whatever it takes. I don't want to fix it." He moved past her toward the door. "I want out." Carolyn grabbed his arm, tears streaming. "Please, I'm begging you, don't do this. I can change. Just tell me what you need." He pulled free, and the emptiness in his eyes gutted her. "I need you to sign the papers when they come." She sank to the floor as the door closed behind him, her sobs echoing through the empty house. Pride, dignity, hope, all of it gone. Just her, alone on the cold tile, one hand pressed to her belly, wondering how love could turn to ash so fast. The courtroom had been silent when Carolyn hit the floor. For a moment, no one moved. The judge froze mid-sentence, her gavel suspended in air. Kevin stood near the plaintiff's table, his expression caught between irritation and indifference. The court reporter's fingers hovered over her keyboard. Even the bailiff, trained for emergencies, seemed stunned by the sight of a pregnant woman crumpling like paper. Then chaos erupted. "Someone call 911. The judge's voice cut through the shock. People surged forward, chairs scraping, voices overlapping in panic. Kevin remained where he was, arms crossed, watching the scene unfold as if it were happening to a stranger. A man in a dark suit pushed through the crowd gathering around Carolyn's motionless body. He moved with purpose, his jaw tight, his eyes locked on her pale face. No one questioned him. In the confusion, he simply belonged. Rodney Cook knelt beside her, his hand instinctively reaching for her wrist to check her pulse. It fluttered weakly beneath his fingers. Her skin felt cold, clammy. The swell of her pregnant belly rose and fell with shallow breaths. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" He leaned close, his voice low and urgent. "Carolyn, work." Her eyelids flickered but didn't open. A thin sheen of sweat covered her forehead. "Sir, you need to step back." A court officer appeared at his shoulder, attempting to create space. "The paramedics are on their way." Rodney didn't move. "She needs help now." "Sir, I'm going with her." His tone left no room for argument. The officer blinked, confused. "Are you family?" Rodney's eyes never left Carolyn's face. His hand moved to smooth a strand of dark hair from her cheek, the gesture so natural it looked rehearsed. "She's my wife." The words ricocheted through the courtroom like a gunshot. Heads turned. Whispers erupted. The judge leaned forward, her expression shifting from concern to bewilderment. Kevin's head snapped up, his face contorting with disbelief. "What did you just say?" Kevin shoved his way through the onlookers, stopping a few feet from where Rodney crouched beside Carolyn. "Who the hell are you?" Rodney stood slowly, his height and presence suddenly commanding the space. He didn't acknowledge Kevin. His attention remained on the court officer. "When the paramedics arrive, I'll ride with her to the hospital. Have someone bring my car around." "You can't just—" the officer stammered, looking between Rodney and the judge for guidance. "Your Honor." Kevin's voice rose, shrill with outrage. "This man is lying. He's not her husband. I'm her husband. Well, I was. We just finalized your divorce." Rodney's interruption was quiet but lethal. He finally turned to face Kevin, and something in his expression made Kevin take a step back. "Which means you have no legal standing here. No claim to her. No say in what happens next. I have every right. You have nothing." Rodney's voice dropped lower, colder. "You made that clear 6 months ago when you walked out. You made it clear today when you stood there and watched her collapse without moving an inch to help." Kevin's mouth opened and closed, his face flushing red. "You don't know anything about our marriage." "I know enough." The paramedics burst through the double doors, their equipment clattering, radios crackling with static. They moved efficiently, dropping to Carolyn's side, checking vitals, firing questions into the tense air. "How long has she been unconscious?" "Maybe 3 minutes." Someone offered. "Any medical history we should know about?" Rodney spoke before anyone else could. "She's 7 months pregnant. High stress. Hasn't been eating properly." He rattled off details with unsettling accuracy. "No known allergies. Blood type O positive." One of the paramedics glanced up at him. "You're the husband?" "Yes." They didn't question it. They had a patient to stabilize. "We're taking her to Mercy General. You riding with us?" "Absolutely." As they lifted Carolyn onto the stretcher, her hand slipped off her stomach, dangling limp at her side. Rodney caught it, threading his fingers through hers as they wheeled her toward the exit. His thumb brushed over her knuckles in a gesture so tender it seemed impossible they were strangers. Kevin tried to follow, but the bailiff blocked his path. "Sir, you need to stay here. The judge hasn't dismissed court." "That's my—" Kevin stopped himself, his face twisting with frustration. "That's my baby she's carrying." Rodney paused at the doorway, turning back just long enough to meet Kevin's eyes. "Then you should have acted like it mattered." The doors swung shut behind them, leaving Kevin standing in the middle of the courtroom, surrounded by dozens of witnesses to his humiliation. In the ambulance, Carolyn's breathing grew more labored. The paramedic adjusted her oxygen mask, his movements quick and practiced. "Blood pressure's dropping. We need to move." Rodney sat pressed against the side wall, still holding her hand, his face a mask of controlled concern. As the siren wailed to life and the ambulance lurched forward, he leaned close to her ear. "I've got you," he whispered, so quietly the paramedics couldn't hear. "I've always had you, Carolyn. You just didn't know it." Her fingers twitched in his grip, but her eyes remained closed. Her mind lost somewhere between consciousness and collapse. She had no idea who was holding her hand. No idea that the man claiming to be her husband had been watching over her life from the shadows for 3 years. No idea that his intervention today was not an accident, but the culmination of a promise he'd made to himself the first night he'd seen her cry. White ceiling tiles, fluorescent lights humming overhead, the sharp, antiseptic smell of disinfectant mixed with something metallic. Carolyn's eyes fluttered open, her vision blurry and unfocused. She tried to sit up, but pain shot through her abdomen, forcing her back down with a gasp. Her hand instinctively moved to her belly, relief flooding through her when she felt the familiar swell still there. "Easy," a deep voice came from her left. "Don't try to move too fast." She turned her head, her heart hammering. A man sat in the chair beside her hospital bed, his elbows resting on his knees, his dark eyes watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. He was handsome in an understated way, sharp jawline, salt and pepper hair at his temples, expensive suit that looked like it cost more than her monthly rent. "A stranger. Who are you?" Her voice came out, hoarse, raw. "My name is Rodney Cook." He straightened in his chair but didn't move closer. "How are you feeling?" Confused. Carolyn's fingers tightened around the thin hospital blanket. "Where am I?" "Mercy, General. You collapsed in the courtroom. They brought you here about 2 hours ago." The courtroom. The divorce. Kevin's cold eyes. It all came rushing back in a nauseating wave. "The baby is fine," Rodney assured her quickly. "The doctors ran tests. You're both stable. You were severely dehydrated and your blood pressure dropped dangerously low. But they've got you on fluids now." Carolyn stared at him, trying to make sense of his presence. "Why are you here?" "Because you needed someone to be." That's not an answer. Frustration crept into her voice. She struggled to sit up again, more carefully this time, and Rodney stood, reaching to adjust the bed controls. She flinched away from him. "Don't touch me. I don't even know you." He stepped back, hands raised in surrender. "You're right. I'm sorry." The heart monitor beeped steadily in the silence between them. Carolyn studied his face, searching for some hint of recognition and finding none. The nurse said, "You told the paramedics you were my husband." "I did." "Why would you say that?" Rodney exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. He looked tired suddenly, the confident exterior cracking just slightly. "Because Kevin wouldn't have let them help you otherwise. He would have interfered, made it about himself, turned your medical emergency into another battlefield. You needed treatment, not drama. So you lied. I did what needed to be done." Carolyn shook her head, confusion morphing into anger. "You had no right. You don't know me. You don't know anything about my life, or my marriage, or—" 3 years ago, Rodney interrupted quietly. "You volunteered at the Street Catherine's charity gala. You were wearing a green dress, and you spent most of the night in the children's wing, reading stories to the kids who couldn't leave their hospital beds. You cried when one little girl asked if you'd come back the next week." The words hit her like ice water. Carolyn's mouth went dry. "How do you know that?" "Because I was there. I saw you." He moved to the window, his back to her now, hands in his pockets. "You talked to a boy named Marcus about dinosaurs for almost an hour. When his mother thanked you, you told her that you were the one who should be grateful. That those kids reminded you why kindness mattered. I don't understand." Carolyn's voice trembled. "You've been watching me for 3 years?" "Watching over you," Rodney corrected, turning to face her. "There's a difference. That sounds like stalking. I know how it sounds." His expression remained calm, patient. "But I haven't interfered with your life. I haven't followed you home, or contacted you, or done anything inappropriate. I just kept track. Made sure you were safe." "Safe from what?" "From Kevin." The name came out hard, edged with something darker. "I recognized what he was doing to you. The isolation, the financial control, the way he made you doubt yourself. I've seen that pattern before." Carolyn felt her chest tighten. "You don't know what you're talking about. Your credit cards were maxed out. He controlled the bank accounts. You stopped seeing your friends, stopped going to the charity events you loved. When you got pregnant, he started staying out later, coming home less, making excuses. Rodney's voice remained steady, but his eyes burned with conviction. I know because I made it my business to know. Why? The question burst out of her, desperate and raw. Why would you care about some random woman at a charity event? Rodney crossed back to her bedside. And this time when he sat, he looked vulnerable in a way that seemed foreign to his polished exterior. Because that little girl you cried over? The one who asked if you'd come back? He paused, his jaw working. That was my niece, Sophia. She had leukemia. You were one of the few volunteers who actually saw her as a child, not a diagnosis. You gave her joy in her last months. The air left Carolyn's lungs. She died? 6 weeks after that gala. Rodney's voice roughened. But she talked about you constantly. The nice lady who promised dinosaurs were real and that brave kids grow up to do amazing things. He looked directly at Carolyn. So when I saw you 2 years later at another event, looking thinner, sadder, with bruises on your wrists you tried to hide with bracelets, I couldn't look away. Carolyn glanced down at her wrists, at the faint yellow-green remnants of old finger marks she'd forgotten were still visible. She pulled the blanket higher. You should have minded your own business. Maybe. Rodney leaned back, giving her space. But I didn't. And I won't apologize for that. The silence stretched between them, heavy with things unsaid. Finally, Carolyn spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. What do you want from me? Nothing you're not ready to give, Rodney said simply. Right now, I just want you to rest, heal, and know that you're not alone anymore. Something in his tone, in the quiet certainty of his words, made Carolyn's defenses waver. She studied his face again, searching for deception and finding only earnest concern. This man, this billionaire stranger, had stepped into her disaster of a life for reasons that made no logical sense. Yet somehow, sitting in this sterile hospital room with machines beeping and her future uncertain, his presence felt less like an intrusion and more like an anchor. And that terrified her more than anything. Kevin arrived at the hospital 40 minutes after visiting hours began. Not because he'd been delayed, but because arriving exactly on time would have implied urgency, and urgency implied he cared. He strode through the maternity ward corridor with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no, his designer loafers clicking against the linoleum. A nurse looked up from her station, ready to direct him, but he was already pushing through the door to room 412 before she could speak. Carolyn was asleep, her face turned toward the window where afternoon light filtered through half-closed blinds. The IV drip in her arm caught the light, and for a brief moment, Kevin felt something flicker in his chest. It died as quickly as it came. Rodney sat in the chair beside the bed, a laptop balanced on his knee, but his attention was on Carolyn. He'd been there for hours, watching the rise and fall of her breathing, the occasional flutter of her eyelids as she dreamed. You need to leave. Kevin's voice cut through the quiet room like a blade. Rodney looked up slowly, his expression unreadable. He closed the laptop and set it aside before standing. Keep your voice down. She needs rest. Don't tell me what to do. Kevin stepped closer, his jaw tight. That's my wife lying there. My child she's carrying. Ex-wife, Rodney corrected quietly. As of this morning. Semantics, Kevin waved a hand dismissively. We were married for 6 years. You're some random guy who showed up and played hero. Who do you think has more right to be here? The person who actually cares about her well-being. Kevin's face flushed red. You don't know anything about me, or our relationship. I know you left her pregnant and alone. I know you controlled her finances, isolated her from her friends, and made her feel worthless. Rodney's voice remained calm, but steel ran through every word. I know you walked out 6 months ago and didn't look back. And I know that when she collapsed this morning, you stood there and watched like she was a stranger. She's manipulative. Kevin shot back. Probably faked the whole thing for attention. That's what she does. Creates drama. Plays the victim. Makes everyone feel sorry for her. She was unconscious for nearly 20 minutes. Her blood pressure dropped to dangerous levels. The doctor said if we'd waited any longer, She could have lost the baby. Rodney took a step forward, his presence suddenly more imposing. But sure. Tell yourself it was an act. Kevin glanced at Carolyn's sleeping form, his lips curling into something between a smirk and a sneer. She's always been weak. Couldn't handle stress, couldn't handle criticism. I spent 6 years walking on eggshells, and for what? Look at her now. Pathetic. Get out. Rodney's voice dropped to a dangerous quiet. I'm not going anywhere. Kevin moved to the opposite side of the bed, deliberately positioning himself closer to Carolyn. In fact, I think it's time we discussed custody arrangements. Custody? Rodney's eyes narrowed. You don't want this child. You made that abundantly clear when you filed for divorce while she was pregnant. Things change. Kevin reached out and adjusted Carolyn's blanket with a proprietary gesture that made Rodney's hands curl into fists. I've had time to think. A child deserves to be raised by their biological father, not some billionaire with a savior complex who thinks he can buy his way into our family. You have no family. You destroyed it. I have rights, Kevin said, his tone shifting to something colder, more calculated. Legal rights. I'm the biological father. And once my lawyer files the proper paperwork, we'll see who the courts favor. A stranger with money, or the child's actual parent. Carolyn stirred, a small sound escaping her lips. Both men froze, watching as her eyes fluttered open. She blinked slowly, disoriented, her gaze moving from the ceiling to Rodney to Kevin. His name came out hoarse, uncertain. Hey, babe. Kevin's voice transformed instantly into something approximating warmth, though it rang hollow. How are you feeling? She stared at him, confusion clouding her features. What are you doing here? I came to check on you. Make sure you and the baby are okay. He reached for her hand, but she pulled it away, tucking it under the blanket. His jaw tightened at the rejection. We need to talk about what happens next. There's nothing to talk about. Carolyn's voice was quiet but firm. The divorce is final. You made your choice. About the baby, Carolyn, we need to discuss custody. The word hung in the air like poison. Carolyn's face went pale. Custody? You collapsed in a courtroom, Kevin said, his tone shifting to something patronizing. You're clearly not stable enough to care for a child on your own. I think shared custody, or perhaps primary custody with me, would be in the baby's best interest. You don't want this baby, Carolyn's voice broke. You told me that. You said. I said a lot of things I didn't mean. I was angry, confused. But I've had time to reflect. Kevin's performance was flawless, his expression the picture of concerned fatherhood. This is my child, my blood, and I won't let you keep me from being a father. You never wanted to be a father. Tears spilled down Carolyn's cheeks. You wanted me to. She stopped, the words too painful to speak aloud. Kevin's mask slipped for just a second, a flash of irritation crossing his features before he smoothed it away. That's in the past. What matters now is making sure this child has a stable home. With you and your girlfriend? The words came out bitter. With me, Kevin said firmly. In a home with resources, stability, and a father who can provide properly. Rodney stepped forward, placing himself between Kevin and the bed. You need to leave, now. Or what? Kevin straightened, meeting Rodney's gaze with cold amusement. You'll have me thrown out? I have every legal right to be here. She's carrying my child. And she's asked you to leave. Actually, she hasn't. Kevin smiled, sharp and cruel. Have you, Carolyn? All eyes turned to her. She looked small in the hospital bed, her hand pressed protectively over her belly, tears streaming down her face. Please go, she whispered. Kevin's smile widened. See you in court, Carolyn. My lawyer will be in touch. He headed for the door, then paused, looking back at Rodney. Enjoy playing house while you can. Judges tend to favor biological parents over sugar daddies. The door clicked shut behind him. Carolyn dissolved into sobs, and Rodney was there instantly, careful not to touch her but close enough that his presence provided comfort. He can't do this, she choked out. He doesn't want this baby. He's doing this to hurt me. Rodney's expression was grim. I know. What am I going to do? We're going to fight him, Rodney said quietly. And we're going to win. 3 days passed before the hospital released Carolyn. 3 days of IV drips, monitoring, and questions from doctors about her stress levels, her support system, her plans for after the baby came. 3 days of Rodney showing up every morning with fresh coffee he never drank himself and books he thought she might like. And 3 days of Carolyn wondering who this man really was. On the second night, after Rodney had left for a business meeting, Carolyn borrowed a phone charger from the nurse and opened her laptop. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard before she finally typed, Rodney Cook, billionaire. The search results flooded her screen. Cook Industries CEO worth $2.3 billion. Rodney Cook pledges $500 million to Children's Healthcare Initiative. Tech mogul launches foundation for at-risk youth. She clicked through article after article, her eyes widening with each revelation. Rodney wasn't just wealthy. He was a force in the philanthropic world. His foundation funded hospitals, schools, women's shelters. He'd built entire medical wings dedicated to pediatric cancer research. The street, Catherine's gala where they'd met, wasn't some random charity event he'd attended. He'd been the primary sponsor. There were photos of him at ribbon-cutting ceremonies, speaking at conferences, shaking hands with governors and senators. But in every image, his expression remained the same, controlled, measured, distant, until she found one photo buried in an article from 3 years ago. Rodney kneeling beside a hospital bed, holding the hand of a little girl with no hair. The caption read, Rodney Cook visits his niece, Sophia Cook, 6, at St. Catherine's Children's Hospital. Carolyn's throat tightened. The girl was smiling despite the tubes and machines surrounding her, and Rodney, his expression was completely unguarded, raw with love and grief. She was still staring at the photo when Rodney walked in the next morning, a paper bag in one hand and 2 coffees balanced in the other. Breakfast. He set everything on the rolling table. Real food, not hospital cardboard. I wasn't sure what you liked, so I got options. Carolyn closed her laptop slowly. Tell me about Sophia. Rodney's movements stilled. He'd been pulling containers from the bag, but now his hand stopped, hovering in midair. You've been researching me. Wouldn't you? She met his eyes. A stranger claims to be my husband, pays for a private hospital room I didn't ask for, and shows up every day like he belongs here. Yes. I looked you up. Fair enough. Rodney sat down, his usual confidence seeming to waver. What do you want to know? Everything. Carolyn shifted in the bed, wincing slightly. You told me Sophia was your niece, that she died after we met at the gala, but the articles don't mention you having siblings. Half-sister. Rodney clarified quietly. My father remarried late in life. Melissa was 20 years younger than me. We weren't close when we were growing up, too much age difference. But when Sophia got sick, Melissa asked me to help. So you funded her treatment. I funded everything. The best doctors, experimental treatments, clinical trials. I would have given every dollar I had if it meant saving her. His voice roughened. It wasn't enough. Carolyn's chest ached watching the pain flash across his face. I remember her now. She asked me to read The Land Before Time. 5 times in a row. That was her favorite. A ghost of a smile touched Rodney's lips. She used to make me do all the dinosaur voices. I was terrible at it, but she'd laugh anyway. You loved her very much. I did. Rodney looked down at his hands. Losing her nearly destroyed Melissa. She blamed herself, blamed the doctors, blamed me for not doing more. Our relationship never recovered. She moved to Europe 6 months after Sophia died. We haven't spoken since. The silence stretched between them, heavy with shared grief. Finally, Carolyn spoke. That still doesn't explain why you've been watching me for 3 years. No, Rodney agreed. It doesn't. He stood and walked to the window, his back to her, shoulders tense. When he spoke again, his voice was careful, measured. Do you remember your mother, Carolyn? The question caught her off guard. My mother died when I was 16. What does she have to do with this? Your mother's maiden name was Morrison, before she married your father, She worked as a nurse at St. Catherine's Hospital. Rodney turned to face her. She was Sophia's primary care nurse during her final months. Carolyn's mind reeled. That's impossible. I would have known. Your mother requested to remain anonymous in all hospital records. She didn't want recognition. Just to help. Rodney crossed back to the bed. Melissa told me about her after Sophia died. How kind she was. How she stayed late on her own time. How she sang to Sophia when the pain got bad. When I saw you at that gala 3 years later, volunteering just like your mother had. Something clicked. You knew who I was. Not at first, but when you introduced yourself and mentioned you were there in memory of your mother who'd been a nurse, I made the connection. His expression softened. You have her eyes. Her compassion. Melissa showed me photos after everything happened. Carolyn pressed her hands to her face, overwhelmed. So you've been following me because of my mother? I've been protecting you because your mother saved what was left of Sophia's childhood. Rodney's voice was fierce now, urgent. She gave my niece dignity and comfort when everyone else saw her as just another dying patient, and when I saw you trapped in a marriage with a man like Kevin, saw you losing yourself the same way Melissa lost herself after Sophia died, I couldn't look away. No, that's insane. But even as she said it, Carolyn felt something shift inside her. The pieces were falling into place in a way that terrified and comforted her all at once. Maybe it is, Rodney admitted. But your family gave mine peace when we needed it most. Let me return the favor. The headline appeared on a gossip website 48 hours after Carolyn left the hospital. Billionaire predator or white knight. Rodney Cook's suspicious interest in pregnant divorcee raises questions. Carolyn sat on Rodney's guest room bed. He'd insisted she stay at his penthouse until she regained her strength and stared at her phone screen with mounting horror. The article was accompanied by a photo of Rodney carrying her unconscious body out of the courtroom, her pregnant belly prominent, his expression intense. The story painted him as a calculating opportunist who'd swooped in on a vulnerable woman at her lowest moment. Anonymous sources claimed Rodney had a history of pursuing women in crisis. One quoted close friend of the family suggested Carolyn was being manipulated, that the timing of Rodney's intervention was suspiciously convenient. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through the comments section. Thousands of strangers dissecting her life, her choices, her character. Gold digger got what she wanted. Poor ex-husband dodged a bullet. Another woman using pregnancy to trap a rich man. By evening, 3 more articles had surfaced across different platforms. Celebrity gossip shows picked up the story. Someone had leaked her hospital records, redacted but detailed enough to humiliate. Her pregnancy complications, her mental state, the medications she'd been prescribed. Kevin's fingerprints were all over it. Rodney found her 2 hours later, still sitting in the same position. Tears streaming down her face. Phone clutched in her white-knuckled grip. He didn't say anything, just sat beside her on the bed and gently took the phone from her hands. Don't read them, he said quietly. It's too late. Her voice broke. Everyone thinks I'm some kind of con artist. They think you're... She couldn't finish the sentence. Rodney scrolled through the articles, his jaw tightening with each swipe. This is Kevin's doing. I know. Carolyn wiped her face with shaking hands. He has connections at these outlets. He's always bragged about knowing editors, having friends in media. I just never thought he'd use them like this. He's trying to control the narrative, Rodney said, his voice hard. Make you look unstable so he has ammunition for the custody battle. Make me look predatory so any support I give you seems suspect. It's working, Carolyn gestured helplessly at the phone. Look at what people are saying. They hate me. They don't even know me. And they hate me. They don't matter. Yes, they do. Her voice rose, desperate. When this goes to court, when Kevin's lawyers bring this up, it will matter. The judge will see these articles. They'll question my judgment, my stability. They'll wonder why I let a stranger into my life so quickly. She pressed her hands to her face. Maybe they're right. Maybe I am being manipulated. Maybe you. Stop. Rodney's hand covered hers, gentle but firm. Kevin wants you to doubt yourself. That's the point. He's making you question reality. Question me. Question your own worth. Don't give him that power. But the damage was done. Over the next 3 days, the media frenzy intensified. Photographers camped outside Rodney's building. A reporter ambushed Carolyn in the lobby, shoving a microphone in her face and demanding to know if she was being held against her will. Rodney's company stock dipped as investors questioned his judgment. His board called an emergency meeting. Through it all, Rodney remained calm. He hired a crisis management team, issued a brief statement defending Carolyn's character, and quietly had his lawyers prepare defamation suits. He installed additional security, rerouted Carolyn's medical appointments to private locations, and personally screened every call and email that came through. But Carolyn could see the strain, the late-night phone calls, the tension in his shoulders, the way he checked security cameras compulsively, always watching for the next attack. "You should distance yourself from me," she told him one night as they sat in his living room, curtains drawn against the flashing cameras below. "This is destroying your reputation, your business, everything you've built. I don't care about any of that." "You should." Her voice cracked. "Kevin is going to keep escalating. He won't stop until he's ruined both of us." "Then let him try." Rodney's eyes were fierce. "I've been through worse." The breaking point came when a tabloid published photos of Carolyn from 6 years ago, from her wedding to Kevin. The accompanying article detailed her history of manipulation, claiming she'd trapped Kevin into marriage through lies and deception. Her former friends were quoted people she hadn't spoken to in years, suddenly eager to share stories that painted her as unstable, attention-seeking, dishonest. All of it orchestrated, all of it deliberate. All of it Kevin. Carolyn made the call that evening, her hands steady with rage. "We need to talk. In person." Kevin suggested a coffee shop downtown, neutral territory. When Carolyn arrived with Rodney at her side, Kevin was already seated, his expression smug. "Quite the circus you've created," Kevin said, gesturing to the empty seat across from him. "Though I suppose that's your specialty." Carolyn remained standing. "How could you do this? How could you be so cruel?" "Cruel?" Kevin laughed, the sound sharp. "I'm protecting my child from a woman who's clearly unstable. You collapsed in a courtroom, Carolyn. You let a stranger claim to be your husband. You moved into his penthouse after knowing him less than a week. What kind of mother does that? The kind who had nowhere else to go because you drained our accounts and left me with nothing." Kevin's smile widened. "Prove it." "Oh wait, you can't." "Because I was careful. I always have been." "What do you want?" Rodney's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Kevin's attention shifted, his expression calculating. "I want what's mine, my child, my reputation, my life back before your savior complex ruined everything." He leaned forward. "Here's the deal. Carolyn signs over full custody, admits publicly that you've been manipulating her, and I make all of this go away. The articles, the scrutiny, all of it." "And if she refuses?" Rodney asked quietly. Kevin's smile turned vicious. "Then I'll make sure the only thing people remember about Carolyn Frey is that she was a gold-digging, mentally unstable fraud who sold herself to the highest bidder. And when I win custody, and I will win, she'll have nothing. Not the baby, not her dignity, not even her name." The truth of what Kevin had always been crystallized in that moment. Not a husband, not a partner. A predator who'd spent years breaking her down so he could rebuild her as something he could control. Carolyn met his eyes, and for the first time in 6 years, she didn't flinch. "Go to hell, Kevin." His expression darkened. "You'll regret this." "No," she said firmly. "I already regret ever believing you loved me. Everything else is just cleaning up the mess." The ride back to the penthouse was silent except for the city sounds filtering through the car windows. Carolyn sat with her hands pressed protectively over her belly, replaying Kevin's words, his threats, the venom in his eyes. She'd stood up to him, finally, but the victory felt hollow when she knew the war was just beginning. Rodney hadn't said a word since they'd left the coffee shop. His jaw remained tight, his hands gripping the steering wheel with controlled force. When they pulled into the underground garage, he killed the engine but didn't move. "I'm sorry," Carolyn said quietly. His head turned sharply. "For what?" "For dragging you into this mess. For letting Kevin destroy your reputation, your business. 4. Stop. Rodney's voice was firm but gentle. He twisted in his seat to face her fully. None of this is your fault. Not Kevin's cruelty, not the media circus, not any of it. But you've lost so much because of me. I haven't lost anything that matters. His eyes held hers, intense and unwavering. Carolyn, I need to tell you something. Something I should have said weeks ago. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Okay. Rodney exhaled slowly, as if gathering courage. The reason I stepped into your life that day in the courtroom wasn't just about repaying a debt to your mother. It wasn't just about Sophia or protecting someone vulnerable. He paused, his expression vulnerable in a way she'd never seen before. It was because I've been in love with you for 3 years. The words hung in the air between them, impossible and undeniable all at once. That's not possible, Carolyn whispered. You don't even know me. I know you better than you think. Rodney's voice was steady now, certain. I know you cry during sad commercials, but hide it by pretending something's in your eye. I know you leave your coffee black because you think ordering anything fancy is wasteful, even though you secretly love caramel. I know you volunteer at the animal shelter every other Saturday, and that you talk to the old dogs no one else wants because you think they deserve to feel special. Carolyn's breath caught. How? I told you I've been watching over you. But it was never cold or detached. Every time I saw you smile despite everything Kevin was putting you through, every time you showed kindness when the world gave you cruelty, I fell harder. His hand reached across the console, hovering near hers but not touching. You're the strongest person I've ever met, Carolyn. Not in spite of your struggles, but because you faced them with grace and dignity when you could have given up. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I'm not strong. I stayed with him for 6 years. I let him control me, break me down, make me believe I was worthless. You survived him, Rodney corrected. And that took more strength than you realize. You protected yourself the only way you could until you were ready to leave. That's not weakness. That's survival. You shouldn't love me. Her voice broke on the words. I'm broken. I'm carrying another man's child. I come with more baggage than any person should have to carry. You're not broken. Rodney's hand finally closed over hers, warm and solid. You're wounded. There's a difference. Broken things can't be fixed. Wounded things heal with the right care. Carolyn looked down at their joined hands, her mind reeling. She'd spent 6 years with a man who made her feel small, invisible, worthless. And now this man, this impossibly kind and patient man, was telling her he saw value in her when she couldn't see it herself. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. How to trust again. How to believe someone could actually love me without wanting to change me or control me. Then we'll figure it out together. Rodney's thumb traced gentle circles on the back of her hand. No pressure, no expectations, just time and space to heal. What if I can't give you what you want? What I want is for you to be happy and safe. Everything else is negotiable. The simplicity of his answer undid something in her chest. She thought of Kevin's demands, his manipulation, his constant need for her to prove her love through sacrifice. And here was Rodney, asking for nothing but her well-being. Kevin never made me feel the way you do, she said quietly. How do I make you feel? Seen. The word came out as a confession. Like I matter. Like my thoughts and feelings and needs aren't burdens but gifts. She met his eyes, searching for deception and finding only earnest devotion. Why would you love someone like me when you could have anyone? Because there is no one like you. Rodney's voice was fierce now, passionate. You think I haven't met hundreds of beautiful, accomplished women? I have. None of them made me feel what I feel when you laugh. None of them made me want to be better, kinder, more present. You did that. Just by being yourself. Carolyn's hand moved to her belly, feeling the baby shift beneath her palm. And this? The baby? You'd really accept raising another man's child? That baby is yours, Rodney said simply, which means they're already precious to me. Biology doesn't make a family, love does. The comparison to Kevin struck her like lightning. Kevin, who demanded she terminate the pregnancy. Kevin, who saw the child as leverage, a weapon, a tool for control. And Rodney, who spoke of love and family, with the ease of someone who meant every word. I'm scared, Carolyn admitted. Scared to trust this. Scared it's too good to be true. Scared you'll wake up one day and realize I'm not worth all this trouble. Then be scared with me beside you, Rodney offered. I'm terrified too. Terrified I'll push too hard, or not hard enough. Terrified you'll never see me as more than the stranger who intervened. Terrified Kevin will find a way to hurt you and I won't be able to stop him. He squeezed her hand gently. But I'd rather be terrified with you than safe without you. Something shifted in Carolyn's chest, a door she'd locked tight beginning to crack open. This man, this beautiful, patient, impossible man, was offering her something she'd never had before. Partnership without possession, love without conditions. A future built on choice, not obligation. I don't love you yet, she said honestly. I don't know if I even know how to love someone properly, but I want to try. With you. Rodney's smile was radiant, transforming his entire face. That's all I need. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and stale coffee. Carolyn sat beside Rodney at the defendant's table, her hands folded over her 8-month belly, her spine straight despite the exhaustion weighing on her shoulders. Across the aisle, Kevin sat with his lawyer, his expression smug and confident. Judge Patricia Morrison looked between both parties, her reading glasses perched on her nose as she reviewed the custody petition. The silence stretched taut as a wire about to snap. Mr. Frey, the judge began, her tone neutral. You filed for full custody of a child who hasn't been born yet. Citing the mother's instability and poor judgment, you've provided media articles, witness statements, and character assessments. However, I've also reviewed the divorce proceedings, financial records, and testimony from Miss Frey's medical team. She removed her glasses. Help me understand why a man who filed for divorce while his wife was 3 months pregnant suddenly believes himself the better custodial parent. Kevin stood, his posture relaxed. Your Honor, I admit I made mistakes during our marriage. I was immature, selfish. But becoming a father has forced me to grow up. I've had time to reflect on what's truly important. Have you? The judge's voice held a note of skepticism. According to hospital records, you visited Miss Frey exactly once after her medical emergency. You stayed for 7 minutes. During that visit, multiple witnesses report you showed no concern for her health or the baby's well-being. Instead, you threatened legal action. Kevin's smile faltered slightly. I was upset. The situation was confusing. What was confusing about your pregnant ex-wife collapsing from stress and malnutrition? Your Honor, she was living with a man she barely knew. A man who ensured she received proper medical care, attended every prenatal appointment, and hired a team of specialists to monitor her high-risk pregnancy. Judge Morrison shuffled papers. The same man you've spent weeks attempting to discredit through media manipulation. Kevin's lawyer stood. Your Honor, my client's concern is for the child's welfare. Your client's concern, the judge interrupted, appears to be control. Mr. Frey, did you or did you not tell Miss Frey to terminate the pregnancy when you filed for divorce? The courtroom went silent. Kevin's face flushed red. That's a private conversation taken out of context. Context being that you didn't want the responsibility of fatherhood until you realized you could weaponize custody to hurt your ex-wife? The judge's expression hardened. I've been on the bench for 23 years, Mr. Frey. I know vindictive parenting when I see it. Kevin opened his mouth to protest, but his lawyer put a restraining hand on his arm. Judge Morrison turned to Carolyn. Miss Frey, I understand Mr. Cook has expressed interest in helping raise this child. Can you explain that arrangement? Carolyn stood carefully, her voice steady. Rodney has offered to legally adopt my baby after they're born, Your Honor, not to replace their biological father, but to provide stability and love. He's made it clear that I retain full parental rights and that any decisions about the child's future will be made together. And you trust him? Carolyn glanced at Rodney, who remained seated, his expression calm and supportive. I do, Your Honor. He's shown me more kindness and respect in 2 months than I received in 6 years of marriage. He doesn't want to control me or the baby. He just wants us to be safe and happy." The judge studied them both for a long moment. Then she looked at Kevin. "Mr. Frey, I'm denying your petition for custody. However, I'm granting you supervised visitation rights once the child is born, with the stipulation that you complete a parenting course and anger management counseling. You will pay child support as calculated by state guidelines. If Miss Frey chooses to pursue adoption through Mr. Cook, that will be handled in separate proceedings." Kevin shot to his feet. "This is ridiculous. That's my child. That child," Judge Morrison said sharply, "deserves a parent who puts their needs first. When you're ready to be that person, the door is open. Until then, this court's priority is the child's welfare." She banged her gavel. "We're adjourned." The sound echoed through the room like thunder. Kevin stormed out without looking back, his lawyer hurrying after him. Carolyn remained standing, her legs shaking with relief and exhaustion. Rodney was beside her in an instant, his hand at her elbow, steadying her. "You did it," he murmured. "We did it," she corrected. They gathered their things slowly, neither eager to face the cameras waiting outside. As they reached the courtroom doors, Carolyn paused and turned to Rodney. "When you said you wanted to adopt the baby," she placed her hand over her belly. "Did you mean it? Every word? Even though it means being tied to Kevin's drama for the next 18 years? Rodney's smile was gentle. "I meant what I said in the car that night. Biology doesn't make a family. Love does. This baby is yours, which means they're already part of my heart." Tears spilled down Carolyn's cheeks, but for the first time in months, they were tears of joy. "I love you," she said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "I know it's fast and probably crazy, but I love you, Rodney Cook." His expression transformed, radiant and unguarded. "I love you too. So much." They walked out of the courthouse hand in hand, into the late afternoon sun. Photographers shouted questions, cameras flashed. But Carolyn didn't care. She felt Rodney's solid presence beside her. Felt the baby kick beneath her palm. Felt the weight of the past finally lifting from her shoulders. 6 months ago, she'd been broken. Lost. Convinced she'd never escape the prison Kevin had built around her life. Now, she stood on the courthouse steps with a man who saw her worth, a future full of possibility, and a family built on choice rather than obligation. The nightmare was over, and the dream was just beginning. Thank you very much for watching. Comment below what you thought and what was the best or worst part. Don't forget to subscribe. Until next time.